Okay, good morning, students. So let's start today's session. Today we're going to talk about the new chapter, right? And we have completed chapter number 1, that is the living world. We have talked about defining something living or non-living, a defining feature for that, the importance of biodiversity, and the importance of identification, nomenclature, the need for a specialized nomenclature or a universal naming, and in that we have talked about the binomial nomenclature, right? And we have also learned about the rules that governs them. Followed by we have talked about certain taxonomic aids. Now, one thing that we have learned in that is if you have to study the entire organisms, if you have to study the entire diversity, right, that is around us, that are living, be it the plants, animals, or microbes, or any organisms, you have to group them, right? And when we talk about grouping, we have to talk about something called classification, right? So we need to talk about classification of organisms. And in continuation of that, today in chapter number 2, we are going to have biological classification. In this chapter, right, what we are expected, what we should learn out of this chapter, right? So here at the moment we will start the chapter. We will talk about why classification is required, right? Why we need to study this? Why we need to group the organisms? We have studied some of them in the earlier class, but again we will continue. We'll try to learn in detail different aspect on why we should classify the organisms. Along with that, we also talk about the history, the origin, how it all started, right? What were the original thoughts on how can we classify organisms, right? What we learn today is something that is going to be unique, that is something already evolved, right? People have already learned from the mistakes. But in the beginning, what were the, basic idea on how can we classify the organisms? Right, from there, how it is evolved, right? In the earlier, it was only two kingdom classification. From two kingdom classification, we have one turn to understand the three kingdom. Then we have got four kingdom. Then we have got five kingdom, and also we have got a six kingdom classification system. Now, how this have evolved, right, and why we are actually currently focused on the five kingdom classification that I'm sure many of you have learned even in class 9th, right? Class 9th, they had a brief introduction, RH Beta, if you remember. So we will talk about these kingdoms, and anybody can tell me what are the five different kingdoms that you have learned in class 9th, if anybody remembers. What were the five kingdoms that you remember?
So the first one is Monera, Protista,
very good. Very good.
Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia.
Okay, good. So we are talking about the five different kingdoms, that is starting from Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. And all of you have learned the basics in the previous classes. So when we talk about this chapter, we are going to talk about the first three kingdoms only in detail, because the last two kingdom, right, that is kingdom Plantae and kingdom Animalia, we are going to talk in detail in two separate chapters, that is chapter number 3 and chapter number 4. So in this chapter, we will talk about importance of classification, the history of classification, the five kingdom classification, why it has succeeded, why people have accepted it, right? And the kingdom Monera, the different organism that is placed in Monera, kingdom that is your protist, the different types of protists, and the last one that is going to be the fungi. We'll talk about these things, and we'll end our discussion of this chapter with a concept on something called the lichens. Lichens, I hope you all might be knowing about. Any idea? You know about lichens? Have you heard of it?
Sir,
yes.
Sir,
yes.
these are kind of fighters.
I'm sorry. Once again, I could not hear you.
They're a kind of thellophytes.
So they convert
Parasites.
So they
are algae,
so they
sir.
They are algae. Okay, Harshita, tell me. Yes.
So they convert atmospheric nitrogen into nitrogenous compounds.
They are called nitrifying bacteria, nitrifying organism, or nitrifying bacteria. These are not, right? So anyway, this is something different, right? Many of you said the answer, but none of you are right. So lichens are a combination, or it's a mutualistic interaction of two organisms, right? One algae and one fungi. So when we are going to have an algae associate with a fungi, And when the association is going to benefit each of these organisms, the algae gets some benefits from the fungi receive some benefits from the algae. So in these condition, right, in this mutualistic interaction, they form the structure, and that is called the lichens, right? I'm sure you have not learned about it. I just asked out of curiosity if anybody knows it. Anyway, so we'll talk about that also, and with that we're going to complete our discussion on this particular chapter. So again, these
Sir,
are yes, yes. Anything?
sir, it means lichens are symbiotic organisms, right?
Yes, yes. Mutualistic interaction or symbiotic interaction. That is also correct. With symbiotic organism. So both are benefiting from each other. Okay. So anyway, so this chapter we have a lot of concepts that are going to be we can write on the board. So again, I have a PPT ready for it. So I'm going to share that. We'll have discussion. Any questions? Reserve the question, and I'll ask you when you have doubts. At that time, at that point of time, you can ask me. Clear? Okay. Let's start. Okay, here we go. Let me. Sorry. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So we have learned about these terms in the earlier class. That is, we have learned what systematics means, taxonomy means, and classification means. So again, just a recapitulation on what we have already learned. Systematics, as you can see on the screen, it can be defined as the study of the kinds and diversity of organisms. What are the different types of organisms? What kind of diversity they are having? And what is the relationship among them? When we are talking about that, we use the term systematics. Right, so first term is going to be systematics. Now the second term that we're going to talk about is going to be the taxonomy. And if you remember, I had used a term earlier that is called taxon, right? It's a group of organisms that is called taxon. So when we talk about taxonomy, right, it is a theory, it's a theoretical approach. It's a theory and practice of identification, description or describing the organism, nomenclature or naming the organism, and classifying the organism. So in taxonomy, what all things we are doing? We are identifying the organism, we are describing it, we are giving detailed information about the organism, we are giving a name. Name is here, binomial nomenclature we are talking about, and then we are going to classify the organism into its particular taxon, and then into the group, kingdom. We have learned about that order, species, genus, all the way to the kingdom. So in that, we are going to classify them. Now, again, as we have the term classification, what is it? The third term, again, we have to understand is classification. Classification into what? Into different taxon. Please switch off your microphones if you have switched it on. So classification is the arrangement of the organism. We are going to arrange them into particular taxa or groups on the basis of what? Their relationships. What kind of relationships? That depends on the type or the criteria that we are talking about. That the more closer the organism, the more similarities they are going to share, they are going to put in basically the species, right? Species, as we know, they are going to have the maximum number of similarity. And as we go up the taxon of the hierarchy of the classification, the similarities are going to get reduced more and more. So, why we need to classify the organism? Please do not use the screen annotation, that is creating problem. One second. Okay. Yeah. So again, why we need to classify the organism? We need to classify the organisms because we need to study all the organisms, right? It's a very simple thing. There are a large number of organisms and we need to study them all. So first point, it is going to make the study of large number of organisms very easy. When you group them, you need to study one or two specimens of the group. You don't have to study the entire organism. First point. The second point, it gives an idea of the whole range of diversity of that is going to be found in organisms. Third point is going to be, it is going to provide information about interrelationships among the organism, that how two different organisms are related. Are they related very closely, or they are related they are not related at all. So, and it is also given idea on the evolution, how evolution has taken place. So that idea also is going to be given with the help of the classification of the organism, because we know the organisms that have evolved at a similar point of time, they're going to be placed in a group or in taxon that are nearby. The last point is it is going to give or a system of identification of known and unknown organisms. All the organisms that we know will be placed in a taxon, and something that we do not know will has to be placed in one particular group or one particular taxon. So these are the reasons on why we need to classify the organism. Now, once you understand that, we already have learned about the hierarchy of classification, right? We all know that the lowest level of the hierarchy is going to be species, or the lowest taxon is going to be species, and the highest, as we know, is going to be the domain, right? Now, if we go from the species, then we have the genus, family, then order, class, phylum, kingdom, domain, and finally the life. Now, what are the domains? We'll talk about that. It comes above the kingdom, and there are 3 domains that are actually, that are actually in practice in today's science in biology. So, how to remember this? This sequence is important, as I had said, and many times what happens, we forget on what it is. So, there is one particular way to remember it. I found it on the internet. Right here, it is said that King Philip came over for good soup. You can make your own. Okay, this is one thing that I found on the internet. So King Philip came over for good soup, and you can see KPCOFGS. That all is going to describe kingdom. P for phylum, C for class, O for order, family, genus, and species. So you have to find your own ways on remembering it, right? It's something you can create on your own. So this is the hierarchy of classification, right? We need to place the organism that we are going to identify into one of this group, and that is going to be used for the classification. How did the classification begin? Right, you can see on the picture here the Aristotle. Right now, he was a person who started the classification scientifically. Now, it's not that before say people had not classified the organism; they have. But again, the first evidence of scientific classification was actually from Aristotle. Now, what did he do? He used entire life or living organism into 2 categories, and of course, that is going to be the plants, and the second one is going to be animals. Right, plants and
Sir,
animals. Yes.
sir, you was called two kingdom of classification, right? And these are its parts, Plantae and Animalia. These are under
I'm coming.
two
I'm
kingdom
coming.
classification.
I'm coming. I'm coming. I did not start that. No, I said history. Did I say 2 kingdom?
Yes.
I think I have not said
No.
that yet. Right? Yeah, just have this. No problem. So I'm saying that what Aristotle did, he started the classification scientifically. Right? People have done the classification, but that time it was non-scientific. They have just classified based on their convenience. Now, what Aristotle did, based on simple fact, based on the morphological character, what we can see. For example, obviously if you ask a small child, right, animals will put in one group, plant will be put in one place, because it is very obvious. Simple morphological character. What we see, what we observe, based on that living organism, put it into either plants or animals. And that is what Aristotle did. And he again classified, or he again grouped the plants into 3 categories. What are those? Tree, shrub, and herb. Very simple thing. You ask a student of a junior class, they'll also group in the same manner. So that's a starting point. As I said, mistakes were made, and from the mistakes you are going to learn and evolve. Right. So here, tree, shrubs, and herbs. And animals were classified based on one simple factor, and that was the presence or absence of blood. Right? If the blood is present, there is one group of organisms, and if red blood, that is red blood. Right? And if animals were not having the red blood, then it is another group. In simple, you can relate that to the vertebrates having the red blood and the invertebrates having the non-red blood. Now, these. This was not the 2 or 3 or 4 kingdom classification. It was just a basic classification that was started. Now the 2 kingdom classification comes with the work of Linnaeus. I hope you know about him. Right? Linnaeus gave the classification system under 2 kingdom. Right? 2 large kingdom he created. What are those? Kingdom Plantae and Kingdom Animalia. Remember, here the study was much more scientific. There was a book published, which all we talk in the later classes. Right. Here the kingdom Plantae included the bacteria, right? The kingdom Monera that we know about, the bacteria, prokaryotes, the photosynthetic plants, and non-photosynthetic fungi. The Animalia, on the other hand, had the unicellular protozoans and multicellular animals or metazoans. Now, these were placed into these kingdoms. So, in other words, what we have done is we are grouping the entire organisms, living organisms, into Plantae or Animalia. So now from there we went on to understand that it is not possible to put every organism into two groups. So this particular scientist Haeckel, right, Ernst Haeckel, in 1866 proposed a third kingdom. Right. What he did, he divided the living organisms not only into plant and animal, but he created a third group, that is the kingdom Protista. Right. So Protista kingdom came into existence with Haeckel. Now we all know what Protista is going to be placed in with. Protista is going to have another group of organisms. Now again, if you think that even now the prokaryotes and eukaryotes that we know about, they are all placed in the same group, which is not ideal. So the four kingdom classification came into existence with the introduction of the new group, a new kingdom, that is kingdom Monera by Copeland. In 1956, what he said that the Monera kingdom should be separated, or this bacteria should be separated from the remaining organisms and placed in a separate group. That group was named as the kingdom Monera. But again, if you understand now, we are going to have four kingdom: Monera, Protista, Plantae, Animalia. But fungi, which is quite different, which does not share the similarities with the plants or the animals, they are still placed under kingdom Plantae. We somehow managed by now, by the four kingdom classification, we have removed the bacteria from this entire group, right? Unicellular organisms that are prokaryotic in nature, and we have placed it separately in Monera. But again, there is a problem. Unicellular organisms are still present in the remaining groups, right? Unicellular and multicellular were present together earlier, but again, with the introduction of Protista, the unicellular organisms have already been separated out. So fungi is still a problem. Now, the five kingdom classification that actually was introduced by, again, we all know, Whitaker in 1969, right? He created the five kingdom classification, right? So here, when we talk about the five kingdom classification, right? There we get all the different five kingdoms. That is going to be kingdom, what we talked about. Now, question is, what was the basis for him to get this five kingdom classification done? What criteria did he use? Now, the criteria that he used, first one is of course going to be the complexity of the cell structure, whether it is prokaryotic or eukaryotic, simple organisms or complex organisms. Second one was the mode of nutrition, like autotrophs or heterotrophs. Can they prepare their own food, or are they dependent on others, right? Again, these things you already know. Now the third point was the organization, right? Whether they're unicellular or multicellular organisms. And the next criteria was reproduction, the mode of reproduction, sexual, asexual, right? And the last one is phylogenetic. What do you mean by phylogenetic? Refers to phylogenetic refers to the evolutionary studies, right? So here the evolution, whether there is going to be a evolutionary relationship between the organism, yes or no, and if they are evolutionary, phylogenetically, if they are closer, right? If they have evolved at a similar point of time, that was also taken into consideration for the five kingdom classification. And we all know these are the five kingdoms, that is Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Now here on the left side, what you see is the characters, right? Some of the major characters that were actually taken into consideration. Cell type, if we come, right, you can see in case of Monera, it is only prokaryotic organism in the entire kingdom, right? It is going to contain the prokaryotic organism. Remaining all four kingdoms are going to be eukaryotic. Remember that. I hope you all know the differences between prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Yes or no? Do you know the difference between
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, so I hope that you all have a basic idea of that. And when we go to the next chapter, later chapter, that is cell chapter, we'll talk about that again in detail. Some differences anyway we will learn today also. Now the second character, cell wall, right? Cell wall are also different. In case of Monera, it is made up of polysaccharide and amino acids. They typically second case protista, you're going to have some of them have, some of them do not have. In case of fungi, they are going to be having it, but without cellulose. Chitin is present, right? There's a chemical structure called chitin. So fungi, chitin is present. Anyways, so from there we go to plantae. Plantae, we all know the cellulose is the major constituent of the cell wall. And finally, in case of animals, in our case, for example, we do not have the cell wall. We have the cell membrane. Now, the next character that is taken into consideration is the nuclear membrane here. And we know that the prokaryotic cell, they are not going to have a nucleus. If they are not going to have the nucleus, they are not going to have any nuclear membrane. Now, the next one is going to be in case of protist. So, protista, and then you have the fungi, plantae, and animalia. All of them are going to have the nuclear membrane because they are eukaryotic, and eukaryotic organisms have nucleus. Now the next one is going to be the body organization. That is, complexity we are talking about. And when we talk about complexity, Monera kingdom, we're going to have single cell, unicellular cellular structure, right? Similarly, the protista also is going to be unicellular. But the difference here, remember, Monera and protista difference here is Monera is prokaryotic and protista is going to be eukaryotic. So that's the differences. And when we go from fungi you're going to have multicellular, you are going to have tissue, and plantae and animalia, we know they're quite advanced, quite complex with organs and organ system level of organization. And mode of nutrition, Monera is going to be autotrophic. They are going to be chemisynthetic autotrophs or photosynthetic autotrophs. So what are these? I'll tell you that in a minute. And you're going to have the heterotrophs. In that you're going to have the saprophytes or parasitic mode of nutrition. Again, ideally you should have learned this in class 10. If not, again I will just tell you that. In case of protists, it is going to be autotrophic, fungi is going to be heterotrophic, plantae is going to be autotrophic, and animalia is going to be heterotrophic. That is going to be holozoic or saprophytic mode of nutrition. Now, dear students, how many of you are unaware of any of the terms that is shown on the screen here? If anyone is unaware of the terms that I'm talking about, for example, chemosynthetic autotrophs, photosynthetic autotrophs, holozoic mode, anyone is there who doesn't know, or are you all aware of these?
Sir, what is holozoic mode, sir?
Okay, in case of holozoic, what happens? We engulf the entire food and we digest the food inside our body, right? Much like what we do, we follow the holozoic mode of nutrition. We take the food inside and we digest the food inside. We break it down inside the body. Okay? Are you clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, and chemosynthetic.
Okay. Now, chemosynthetic. Okay. Now, chemosynthetic means chemical. Right. One second. So, photosynthetic. Photo means what? Any idea? What is photo refers to here? Any idea?
Sunlight, sir.
Light.
Light,
Yes.
sir.
Very good. Sunlight or light we are talking about. Very good. Very good. So what we are doing is there is a synthesis of the food material that is taking place with the help of the energy coming from the sunlight. Right. Very simple thing. Sunlight is going to be used for cooking the food. Similarly, here what happens in chemosynthetic method, it is the metabolic reactions that are actually used. Like metabolic reactions that are actually used in synthesis of the food material, right? The chemical reaction inside the body or inside the organism is going to be the source of the food or energy for these organisms, and that's why they're called chemosynthetic autotrophs. And remember, chemosynthetic autotrophs, they are not dependent on anything, and they are definitely not dependent on even the light. They are actually independent of the light. Many organisms that are actually living on the bottom of the sea, right, where the light cannot penetrate, or if the organism is living in a place where the sunlight is unavailable, right, and if they are autotrophic, they are going to be photosynthetic. They are going to be chemosynthetic autotrophs. They will prepare food without the requirement of light. Okay, shall we move on? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Now,
Yes,
we
sir.
talked about we talked about 2, 3, 4, 5 kingdom classification, and as I just said, there is going to be 3 domain system, and because of that, we are also going to have the 6 kingdom classification system. What is that? As you can see here, I'm going to have bacteria and archaea, right? Kingdom Monera that we are talking about, right? Here, what we see 3 different domains, What are the three different domains? One is going to be the bacteria, it is one domain. Then we are going to have archaea, one domain, and then we are going to have the eukarya, that is the third domain. So we are going to have the three domain. Now three domain, six kingdom. What are the six kingdom? Eubacteria, that falls under bacteria domain. Archaeobacteria, that comes under archaea domain. And the protista kingdom, plantae, fungi, animalia kingdom, that is going to come under the eukarya domain. So these are the six kingdom classification system that are actually the current trend. But again, the discussion that we are going to make will be based on the five kingdom classification system. So we'll follow the regular five kingdom system given by Pittakar to understand what it is. So again, later on in some classes we'll see, especially in the NEET classes, what I do is I actually talk about a natural system of classification, artificial system of classification, phylogenetic system of classification, the benefits and demerits of each of the system. But again, we will talk about that in the NEET classes when we start that. For now, let us limit our discussion to that. Now the obvious question is, why so much of change, right? Why did it go from 2 all the way to 6, right? Why so much of change is required? So a simple answer, again, it's a very important question, and a simple answer to that is because there is change in the criteria of classification. Now, every time what happens, the science is developing, the biology is developing, the way we study the organism, the way we look at organisms, right? The anatomy, the morphology, the physiology, the biochemical structure, the metabolic reactions, right? The ultrastructure of organisms or the cellular structure, all of these are changing with the development in the field of science and technology, right? We did not have a very well developed microscope way back, but now we do have. So we can see some things that we were not able to see earlier, and that is why that understanding of something new, that study of something different, that basically asks us to change the criteria for classification. And when we change the criteria of classification, we have to change the classification system. So I'm going to give you a few examples of what has happened, what mistakes were made, and how it has been rectified now. So earlier what happened? Inclusion of bacteria, blue-green algae, fungi, mosses, fern, gymnosperm, all of these were placed in the same kingdom, same group under plants, and it is simply based on the cell wall composition, which is not correct. Now, again, if you understand that both the prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms were placed in the same group, again, which is highly illogical in today's understanding. Now, the second thing is the unicellular and multicellular organisms were placed together. Again, that is also something today we feel was very stupid to do it. But again, at that point of time, the science did not allow them to group it in that manner. So as you can see here, one example is the Chlamydomonas and Spirogyra. They were also placed together under algae. I think why these two are important in the next class. Now the autotrophs and heterotrophs, again, these are two different types of modes of nutrition, but they were also placed together, right? Even the cellular composition were different for the fungi and plants, but they were placed together, right? You know that fungi is made up of chitin, the cell is made up of chitin, and in plants it is made up of cellulose. So these problems were there, and that is the reason why these classification system has changed and it has to evolve over time. Now what we have done, we have removed the fungi from the entire group, we have put it in a separate kingdom. The algae has been taken differently, the ferns and gymnosperms, so we'll talk about that also. Angiosperm is different, right? Now we have placed the autotrophs and heterotrophs differently, we have placed the unicellular and multicellular organism differently. So these things we have developed. Why? Because these things have evolved, right? We have changed the understanding of the science. Okay, anyway, somebody is asking, sir, which kingdom will the insectivore plants like Venus flytrap, which a plant will come? Obviously, they are plants that there is adaptation, right? So these are definitely plants. When we talk about insectivorous plants, they are not insects, they are not animals, they are plants, but they are having an adaptation to get that what do you call nutrients, certain nutrients like nitrogen from the insects by killing them. So they are plants, they'll be placed under kingdom plantae, right? Okay, so I think Samiksha, somebody was actually, I think, asking something. Anybody else has any other doubts? Please ask. Yes. Yes, any other doubts? Please ask. We have 5 minutes. Hello, can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sakti Swarup, did you understand the question answer what I said about your question? Okay. So if you have any other questions, please ask. It was a very introductory class of classification, right? And on tomorrow's class, that is tomorrow onwards, we will start with the first kingdom, that is kingdom Monera, Protista, and it is a very small chapter. Nothing much to understand here. As I said earlier, the first unit is more like remembering. So less of understanding, more of remembrance. But again, as you go on from the second or third chapter onwards, you have to understand the concepts there. Yes, any other doubts? Somebody had raised the hand, I guess. Samiksha, or somebody was raising the hand, I guess. You can ask the question now. Yes, Harshita asked. Harshita, you can ask.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, is Rhizopus a fungi?
Okay, Rhizopus is going to be a fungi. Yes. Why? You ask. Because we'll talk about that again.
Okay, sir.
Anything else? Anything else? Anybody else? Any doubts you have? Or should we end?
Sir,
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Neha, right? Yeah, ask.
Sir, to which kingdom the multicellular decomposers belong?
Okay. The multicellular decomposers, as we know, are going to be okay. If you are referring to the fungi, right? The fungi will be, multicellular decomposers are typically fungi. Fungi actually help in decomposition in many decomposers, and they will be, obviously they will go to the kingdom Mycota or kingdom fungi. But again, some other protists are also involved. But again, they are going to be placed in the kingdom protista. But they are unicellular in that case. Okay.
And Euglena?
Okay, Euglena is going to be a protist. We'll talk about that. Euglena, Paramecium, they will be under protists. Different type of protists are there. We'll talk about that.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Samiksha.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Samiksha, speak.
Sir, what is the main difference between what is the difference between holozoic and saprophytic mode of nutrition?
See, holozoic means we are taking the entire food, the whole food, right? We don't degrade it outside. We take it inside, and the body or the organism's body is going to release a large number of chemicals or hormones, or the enzymes, and the enzymes degrade the food inside, assimilate it, and get energy out of it. Now, in case of the other one, I think you asked about saprophytes.
Saprophytic,
Yeah,
yes, sir.
saprophyte, what happens is these organisms, they're going to degrade the food outside, dead and decaying organisms. They actually derive the nutrition from dead and decaying organic matter. For example, if a plant or animal is dead, it'll get rotten. We all know that, right? So what happens? Fungus, something like fungus is saprophyte, it grows on them. The fungus releases the enzymes, right? And this enzyme that is released from the fungus mycelium, that is going to degrade, or that is going to digest the organic matter in that dead organism. And once it is degraded into simple inorganic constituents, or simple matter, that is going to be taken in by the fungi. So here, in case of fungi, saprophytic nutrition, mode of nutrition, the food get digested outside, or the organism obtain the nutrition from outside. And here, outside is referring to the dead and decaying organic matter. So the digestion here is not intracellular, it is going to be extracellular digestion. In our case, for example, it is intracellular. Digestion is going to take place inside the cell. Once we break it down, it is going to be completely digested inside the organism. But here it is going to be extracellular digestion, because enzymes are released outside the fungi, and that is going to be degraded. And once it is degraded, then it is going to be taken inside. I hope I'm clear, Samiksha.
Yes, sir, understood.
Understood? Okay. Anybody else? Any other doubts? You can ask. Anybody is having any other doubts? Yes or no? Please reply.